Good morning, good afternoon to everyone. I suggest that we start. So again, as I said, welcome everyone to this before last Spark of the year. It's a very important Spark, I will feel, for our CIBP network community, as we have invited Ted George to be our Spark host, as he also was our Master of Ceremony for our 30th CIBP Congress this year that took place early November in Paris. So I'm happy to see some familiar faces through our Spark network and also familiar faces. Like I just see Nicole who connected, as we were all, some of us were in Paris live to attend this important reunion for the CIBP network and also for its reason of being. So with that, I will be granting the word to Ted. Ted, thank you again for accepting to be a mini master of ceremony for our big Spark, or the contrary, of course. So it's a pleasure to hear also from you, dear colleagues who were at the Congress, or some of you who could not make it to the Congress but still have some questions to interact with us today, as this is
I think we might have lost Valeria there. There was an issue. Brigitte, on that front, would it be okay if I continue and then we get Valeria back? I think she was literally about to hand back.
Exactly, she was about to hand over. So, Ted.
Thank you very much. Thanks. Okay, and I really hope we get her back very soon. Hi, everyone. Just give me 1 second so I can put out my slides and then I'll introduce myself. Okay, yes, so thank you very much for that introduction, and it's very nice to be back again talking to the CIBP. I can't believe it was only, 2 or 3 weeks ago. So much has happened since then as well, but it really feels like it was a remarkable point in the year. So I'm really happy to come back and do basically a Spark about it. So I've already recognized some faces on there, some of the names on there, you know me. If you're at the Congress, you probably noticed me over the 2 days. It was great to meet so many of you and work with a lot of you. But those of you who don't know me, I'm Ted George. I have more than 20 years of banking sector experience, particularly in research. I was at the Economist Intelligence Unit, working in the Africa and commodities teams. I was then at the Pan-African Bank, EcoBank, as head of research, and certainly got a lot of involved there in trade and commodities financing, and in more recent years, working a lot on sustainability and fintech. But one of the key passions of mine is chairing and moderating conferences. And so it was great that I managed to get in connected with the CIBP team. And really since earlier this year, but particularly heavily, I'd say over the last 3 or 4 months, I've been working with the CIBP team to help put together the agenda, get it approved with all the stakeholders on board, working with the working groups and all the different partners, particularly the host as well, France. And then on the day when we were ready to go, I was the co-MC, along with Louise Eklund, and also the moderator of the 4 working groups, which I'll talk about in a bit. So great to be back. Essentially, what I've been asked to do is to do a Spark about the Congress. So I'm just going to give you my own impressions of it. You know, I was intimately involved in the program. I'm going to pull out some of the things that were highlights for me, but it is not comprehensive. There were over 35 speakers. There were so many different sessions and discussions. So I've just chosen some. If you weren't chosen, I'm sorry. It's not, I'm trying to be unkind. I'm just really trying to remember the things that stood out for me and the sessions I was involved in, and then try and wrap it up with some ideas at the end. And then I'm really interested to hear everyone else's views as well. Maybe the key thing just to say about the organization of the Congress is, you know, a big hats off to the gang of 3, Valeria, Brigitte, and Matthias, who, you know, without them, there would not have been a Congress. So much work has gone in over maybe 18 months as well. And it was great to form part of a gang of 4 towards the end there and pull it all together. So this has been, you know, an amazing journey for everyone, and I think a really happy outcome. So First of all, the background on the Congress, if you don't know it. To put it simply, the 30th Congress, the first Congress since 2015 in Rio. There's a reason for that. It wasn't just about COVID, which disrupted some of the plans. The CIBP went through some difficult times as well, as did the global economy. And the aim of this Congress from the beginning was always about getting back the entire global cooperative banking community, getting them back together, face-to-face engagement together, and starting the process afresh. There is a huge opportunity with this Congress that we wanted to follow. Number one, to build expertise, understanding about all these issues covered in the working groups. Also to share ideas and best practice. This is the whole thing. We can all inspire each other by the different things we do. There are always similarities between the markets, the customers, or the clients we work with. There's things we can learn from each other, but also building professional networks. And as much as we try with online approaches to build networks, it can work to a certain degree. Spending time together, building those professional networks, and if anything, putting in the roots for them because they need to grow afterwards. That's really what so much of the Congress was about. So it was held at the Novotel Paris, which is near the Eiffel Tower, in early November. And there was a phenomenal team involved in getting it ready. The photograph you can see there, that is the main Congress hall, the amphitheater on the first day when they were prepping it. The first thing to say, a beautiful venue. It was raked as well. I hope you enjoy that if you're in the audience. There was an amazing backstage team as well. I mean, a whole army of people. You can see the makeup there in the corner, but they had the sound guy there, all of the enormous projections. There were lots of videos used as well. And of course, the whole thing was filmed and projected. So it was an amazing team which was there, added to everyone, of course, who'd been working to put the program together. The event itself was very well attended. Anyone who's there could tell you that as well. I think total numbers that actually came through the door were 270, and that's from 17 different nations. So people did come from all around the world. And, all of the sessions were very well attended. We had a half day at the beginning and a full day at the second. On the left, that's on the very first day. On the right, that's a photograph I took from the stage when everyone was asked to put on the scarves which were on their chairs, and essentially that was the tricolore, the French flag, and everyone wore that while we were talking about the Olympics, which are coming up next year in Paris, and many surprising connections to cooperative banking I hadn't thought about. So there was very strong attendance and very good engagement. But I should definitely say, hats off to the Brazilians who had genuinely a huge presence at the Congress in numbers, in attitude, in energy, in the vibrancy of it as well. And that was great to see. If you look on the left there, that was the first poll we took, just saying which region of the world are you from? And you can see there that actually Latin America is well over half. And in fact, of that Latin American bunch, I don't know, 80, 90% were probably Brazilians. We also had very strong French delegation, of course, because we're in France, and many other nations as well. But I think it was fascinating to see how the different Brazilian teams turned up at the Congress, as would expect, because the presidency is still currently with Brazil. One thing to say generally, LinkedIn, I was really happy to see everyone using LinkedIn a lot. That goes to say a lot about the connections. We saw, the German Cooperative Bank Group, we saw the French, we saw CIBP as well, all posting huge amounts about the conference, the Congress and the panels. We also had some of the speakers posting, Guy Cormier, I'll talk about him in a bit, Kirsten Manser as well. And then we had people who had attended and just had really interesting feedback and positive things they were putting up. Great stuff there from Frederick Muger, also from Julie and Matthias as well, who wrote about some of the people that he had got together for this panel, which was definitely one of the most interesting. So I think that's a huge area to develop. I think most of the people who did this on their own initiative, but the opportunity to post a huge amount of material around a Congress and all the follow-ups is amazing. And that's good for CIBP, because ultimately, if you want to say, hey, come and join us, people have to really not only know you exist, but see you're doing stuff. So if it's constantly coming up this kind of thing, you've got the opportunity of getting more potential members in the future. Anyway, certainly, even without a coordinated strategy on this one, there was very good hits. And LinkedIn is what really counts when we're talking about business. We also did lots of polls, and I was quite happy with each of the working groups. We asked everyone what they thought, various questions, and I thought I'd just share a few of the polls now. We can look at them. So this one, how fast is your bank in the execution of regulatory requirements? And most people seem to be okay, pretty fast or just in time. So that was a good sign that people were on top of it. This question of governance came up strongly, and you can see that it was really quite important. So I was pleasantly surprised to see that that was the genuine opinion of people. Then when we look at this question of how concerned are you that regulation in your country is hurting cooperative banking and constraining growth? There are stories of certain markets or certain countries where there really is an existential crisis against cooperative banking. And I think you can see those on the left and right, on the right, the two on the right there. But for most, there seemed to be very strong engagement from regulators. And I think that came through actually in some of the discussions with the regulators that we had later on. So that I think really reflected for me how it depends on what market you're talking about. Because for some markets, this is a very serious question. And for another, it's like, no, actually, this is really helpful, our engagement with the regulator. We did another one when it was during the membership relations, looking at asking everyone to rank the values of cooperative banking in order of importance. And I love doing polls like this when you get lots of people voting. We had at least 100 people voting for each of the polls, because you really do get a good balance of what people are thinking. And I thought it was great that number one came up, trust. As a banker, that immediately makes me feel like, yeah, you've got that right. Okay. The simplest thing they say about banking is banks sell trust and buy risk. It's all about trust and reputation. So the fact that that is up there is great. And that is essentially held up by everything down below, all the other pillars. I love the idea closeness to customers was number two. That for any enterprise is essential, but particularly for cooperative banking. So that's in your blood. It makes sense it's there. And of course, solidarity and sound governance. I love the way that those two both hold together. You can't have solidarity without sound governance. And the solidarity defines the kind of governance you want, which is equitable and fair. Those other points on there as well. So I thought a really interesting snapshot. You could interpret it in different ways, but I love the fact that it comes back to this idea of trust and closeness to customers, because that's one of the ways you could sum up. That's what cooperative banking is. And then a final poll on when we got into the sustainability sessions, we looked at this question of, how important are these sustainability issues for your bank? And after the vote, I thought it was really interesting to see that the number one, ultimately on balance, was preventing fraud and corruption at the bottom. And again, as someone who's worked in the financial sector before, that also makes me think, yeah, absolutely right. Fraud is still one of the major causes of loss for businesses, but also for banks itself. It hits your bottom line, and it gets back to this whole question as well of governance as well, and having the right kind of governance institution in there, not having corruption or twisted interests in a board. So the fact that was so high up, I think, is really good. And you can see improving governance as well came in second place. And then on the social issues, absolutely the fact that forced labor and child labor is high up there, and really quite strong as well on carbon footprint and biodiversity. It's not surprising that the lowest, if you like, on the list is phasing out fossil fuel usage. I mean, something had to be lower on the list ultimately. But really, if you look at most developing markets, particularly, let's say you look at Africa, the whole question of fossil fuel usage is not an issue. Carbon footprint is tiny. It's much more about deforestation because of agriculture. It's not carbon emissions from chopping down rainforest, as is happening in Brazil, for example. So I thought very interesting there as well to see some of the sustainability issues, how important they are. I think that was reflected as well in the different working sessions. So there are essentially 4 working groups. These have been running for quite a while. A huge thanks to everyone who's involved running those groups and also being the working group of the working group as well. Matthias Klein as well, amazing job he did there, really working with all the different parties to come up with some coherent topics to talk about and some great speakers. So we looked at digitalization, we looked at regulation, we looked at membership relations, and we looked at sustainability. And so within all of those, I think we touched on many of the key issues that are affecting cooperative banking, have been, and of course, going forward will in an important way. The conference itself, what I loved about it is it was genuinely multilingual. As I said, there were 17 nationalities. There must have been at least 10 languages. 4 languages were used in the conference. And it was certainly for me the first time I've consistently used the languages the whole way through. And I thought it was great because there was such an opportunity here for people to express themselves. Sorry to Germans if we were not able to translate into German, but you can already see, in the photograph on the right there, okay, Jan is speaking English with no problem at all, and he did a great job. That was one of the opening panels with the presidents, which I think was in 3 languages. So that multinational side and multilingual was great, and the interpreting team did a wonderful job keeping up with all of us over the 2 days. So when it comes to the presentations, I thought I'm just going to give you a selection of things that I thought stood out, either in terms of the individual themselves or in terms of their importance to the program. And then at the end, I'm very interested to hear of other people who say if there are other people I should have mentioned or other moments of the Congress which they really liked. So if we start off just looking at the leadership, first off, I definitely think Mr. Almada, the CEO of CIBP, really made an amazing impression. He spoke at the beginning. He also finished with a rousing speech for action in our very final session, and he was very present throughout. His presence was there in the signing as well of the sustainability agenda, which we'll get onto in a moment. So I was very grateful for his presence there as well, and I think he really made an impression about what leadership is supposed to be, which is leadership is there to be seen. And he was seen, and he was speaking a very consistent and clear message. And you can certainly see that from the vibe of the room, full of Brazilians. But also we had a really interesting session on the second day, which was moderated by Louise Eklund of Nicolas Namias, the CEO of BPC in France. And that offered a really interesting, different kind of perspective as well on a lot of issues to do with regulation and how France and the French market works particularly, and then how European markets work, and the differences that means then for any of the learnings that you can take away for all of the other nationalities and markets that were represented at the Congress. So an interesting comparison between two, but 2 very strong leaders coming across there, I thought, in the Congress. And then also for me, my own, I had the opportunity to do the final fireside chat between Cyril Brun and Guy Cormier. Cyril was standing in for André Joffre, who very unfortunately had an accident and wasn't able to attend. Cyril, Director General of Banque Populaire du Sud, and then Guy Cormier, CEO of Desjardins Group in Canada. And it was a fascinating discussion, not just because of the accents. I speak French with an English accent. Cyril speaks it with, I think, an Occitan accent, and Guy with a Canadian accent. So that was very interesting for the translators. But I thought it was really interesting to get this contrast between, well, this is how it works in North America, and this is how it works in Europe. And it really got to the nub of a lot of the big issues about how decisions work in terms of regulation in the business, and how as leaders you react to that as well. I particularly like one comment Cyril made. He said, on doit voir loin et agir près. We have to look near, we have to look far and act near. In other words, we have to look into the distance and understand what's coming, but we need to act on the stuff we can do something about now, right? Rather than staring at this thing coming towards us, we need to act now. So I thought that was a very powerful message that came from them there and tied up the leadership contribution very strongly. There was also, at the end of that as well, the Sustainability Manifesto. This is something which was put together by the CIBP in collaboration with a number of the banks who are members. And it's something that I really think, I hope, will be built on by the CIBP. It's an initial manifesto. It has 2 bold pledges and essentially 10 objectives that you sign up to if you want to. But there's an opportunity here as well to develop this a lot more and to really, develop a sustainability structure and strategy that can be adopted by all the cooperative banks. Because as I'm going to say later, I mean, cooperative banking really does fit into sustainable banking very well indeed, particularly if it's well run. So it makes sense that sustainability should be at the center of the business agenda, not just the ethical agenda. So there's a photograph of all of them on stage after they signed the document. So moving on to other kinds of speakers, we had some central bankers, which was great. We had Eduard Fernandez Bolo, member of the supervisory board at the European Central Bank. And we had Otávio Ribeiro Damaso, Director of Regulation at the Central Bank of Brazil, who spoke on different days. I was also fascinated by the contrast in the different discussion because, of course, they're talking about very different markets and very different ways that they're structured. I thought Mr. Fernandez-Bola was very interesting in the way he gave insight into how European regulators see it, how much European structures, regulations, standards are being adopted or amended by other nations as well. In other words, how much Europe is leading and the areas it is not as well. But what I found fascinating talking to Mr. Damaso as well is understanding this relationship that there can be between the central bank and the cooperative banks. And I think one of the things that struck me in our discussion was where he talked about the need to be resilient in crisis. You know, what is a regulator for if you are a cooperative bank? You want a regulator that's resilient in crisis. You want to know that they are going to give a proactive reaction, okay? It's not going to be that they see a crisis coming and they bury their head and everything falls down. They're going to be proactive. And I think there's a lot of evidence, particularly in Brazil, of having a regulator which is engaged with the cooperative banking sector. And that's why it's so large. And, you know, that could definitely be one of its strengths. So very interesting, again, contrast, which I think what is great about the Congress, we're seeing these different viewpoints from the world, how they relate specifically to cooperative banking. And then CIBP speakers, there were various members spoke. There were actually quite a few who did. So rather than pull them all out, I'm just going to give two special mentions. I thought one was Emanuela Moraes, who spoke about the sustainability journey of CIBP. I thought it was fascinating to see the different steps that have been involved and, you know, how some of them were clearly business steps, others were clearly ethical steps, and others are just the natural development of where you would expect cooperative banking to go if you're trying to be an ethical business with a positive social impact. And then also special mention as well to Edson Lisboa, who, you know, did a multiplicity of things as well, you know, working in the working group, a huge work on the digital, taking part in the digital session, also actually doing an elevator pitch. And one of the things that really struck me about the various comments Edson made is this whole question about when we talk about mentoring as well, the fact that it needs to go in both directions. I like that because that not only goes for if we're talking about a bank and a fintech or an innovator and a young person coming in who you're trying to mentor, but it also goes for banks as well. I think banks and clients need to teach each other. You know, we need to go in and explain certain things to clients, but they also need to teach us things about their business so we can better serve them. So that struck me very much as a theme which came through this idea of two-way traffic when it comes to dialogue. Learnings, okay? That's the basis of dialogue. Okay, and then we had a number of external speakers and quite a few of them. So again, I've just pulled out a handful, which really for me stuck in the mind. The first is definitely Austin Brown. Austin Brown, personally, probably my favorite from the Congress. He's president of the Cooperative Bankers Union in Jamaica. And the fact is his personality and warmth just kind of came across so beautifully. I'd previously spoken with him on the phone before and realized he was a really nice guy. And it would have been lovely to have a bit more time with him because I love his attitude to life, incredibly positive, go-getting attitude, but also such a focus on things that really matter about, you know, what is the future? How do we operate as a community as well? I love the fact that he used that expression that we all operate like a honeycomb, you know, very Caribbean expression. But, you know, in a honeycomb, it's like it's all squashed in there, but it's everyone collaborating with each other. Everyone's got a certain job to do. And there's a lot of communication going on and collaboration between the different parts of the comb. It's not a whole bunch of silos. So I think that stuck with me very much, along with a lot of the other things that he said. So I hope we can have him back in the future. Another one who really stood out for me as a great speaker was Coraline Vitalis. She was on the panel that Louise moderated about the Olympics. Coraline is an Olympic fencer. You know, she has a connection with the Banque Populaire team. But, you know, she has won numerous different championships. She has a lot of medals, and she is hoping to be representing France in the Olympics in Paris next year. So big hopes on that one, how that will go. I must say, I was just really struck by her, quite a few things about just her positivity. And the thing that you often get with the young, where they just seem so incredibly certain. I love the fact that she was certain about what she wanted to do, but without an ounce of arrogance. It was all just about recognizing work would have to be done. Yeah, sorry, can I just pause one moment? I just need to check something. Hi there. My apologies. It was my daughter coming back from school, so I had to let her in, I'm afraid. Anyway, another young person as well, going somewhere interesting in the world. But no, I really like Caroline, and I like the fact that when we spoke to her, she was saying, "Oh, well, I had to miss training today, this morning to do that." I said, "Oh, oh, well, never mind." She's like, "No, no. As soon as I finish today, I'm going straight to training." So that's someone, youth who has the bit between her teeth. And then another really interesting character as well was Thierry Marx, the renowned chef and early proponent of molecular gastronomy. A very interesting chat that he had with Louise Eklund, which I think really went through all the sort of ups and downs of his life. I think it was fascinating to see just how many moments of luck that he basically rose to when they suddenly said, "Go and cook," and he just seized that moment. But also he talks a lot about this idea of the transmission of values and how do you transmit values culturally. I think that is critical when we think about values and how they sit at the heart of cooperative banking. So yeah, I thought it was very interesting to have as a speaker. And then myself also, I got the opportunity on one of the panels. We had Guillaume de Sazilly from Mini France and Guillermo Torres, the CEO of the African Leadership University. I both found them really interesting, the comments that they made, but particularly one stuck out with me when Guillaume was talking about Mini and also people's attitudes, how they change towards what they feel and how they identify themselves. So back in the 1950s, 60s, people identified by what they owned. It might be a really nice car, it might be a house. By the 80s, 90s, it was much more about your lifestyle. You choose to live this way, do this thing, travel the world, or maybe take a serious job, but it's a lifestyle choice. Today, youth want to be involved in something. They want to be part of something bigger, part of a movement. And I think that was a really interesting takeaway as well, because that ties in as well with cooperativism. It is about having clear morals, clear objectives out there, social objectives as well. It's not just another bank trying to make some money. It's not just another business. So very interesting there how that ties in with youth. And then Guillermo talking the African Leadership University, really interesting model. This idea that there aren't enough professors or teachers in Africa. How do we teach everyone? You can't just do it all online as videos that you watch. You need teaching, discussion, someone saying, "I don't understand," so someone explaining, all that sort of stuff. How do you do it? So this idea of shared learning comes in as well. And their entire model I thought was fascinating because there are certain, you use one live professor for one or two things here and there where you can afford them. You have some recordings, but you also have this peer learning where everyone is teaching each other. And this idea of sharing the resources as well, I think that really kind of resonates as well. This idea of shared working, shared learning, it gets back to this idea of shared values as well. So it all fits in with the bigger picture, very effective way of going about it. And he's very much part of what you can maybe call Web 3.0, which is the internet of skills. We have the internet of things, it's now about skills. And that's when you get into things like AI, etc., which we also discussed in the Congress. So just a few other things to say. Things that stood out: closing ceremony, loved it. Breakdance by Leggy Team Obstruction, they were great. They were so professional, turned up, worked out their space in no time, and they did a fantastic job. And I certainly have pictures in my mind of him literally spinning on his head, I seem to remember, but extraordinary, really fun way to finish the Congress. And then, of course, maybe a little bit more sedate the previous night, the gala dinner on the Seine, which was really good because there were so many people there. It was one of these huge, beautiful, long Parisian boats. And even though it rained at the start, we were inside, we were having lovely dinner. We even went past at one point the mini Statue of Liberty, which is on the Seine, very close to where our hotel was. And of course, we got some beautiful pictures of it as well. So it was that was very beautiful. That was snuck in the middle of the Congress. So what were my key takeaways? I will wrap up and then we can open up for any questions if you want them. Key takeaways, first thing is just to say, wow, what an extraordinary experience. I've done many conferences and congresses and roundtables and webinars, loads over the years, but rarely have I had to use all of my skills in so many different ways at the same time. So it was extraordinary as an experience, and I really enjoyed being part of it and the team. Just really happy to see that it worked out well. If I'm honest, no Congress is perfect, no conferences. There will always be things which weren't quite right. But overall, I think it really did deliver, and I was very happy to be part of that. I think the key thing, learning that I took from day one, cooperative banking always comes back to values. I mean, I've talked about it earlier on here, but we keep seeing this thing coming up again. And it was amazing how many different ways values were defined. You know, we talked about the value, the social value of the work of cooperative banking and supporting society, living income, all that sort of stuff. But then you think about the sharing of values. There are so many different kinds of cooperative banking movements all around the world who have certain shared values. You recognize each other, but also something raised in the value of our differences. The fact that actually the differences also give us value there as well. So everything about values comes in. And I think that's the difference between someone who's mature and immature. You know, someone who's mature has the values embedded in them, right? They've been tested throughout their life and they stick to them because that's what you believe in. And then I think the other thing that really came up, particularly over the second day, was this whole idea of youth. The youth, the younger generation, I think this whole thing that they have high expectations for social justice. They see the world differently. They're not prepared to put up with certain things that we do, just as we wouldn't put up with certain things that our parents did, etc. It goes back and back. But that means ultimately, I think cooperative banking is very nicely aligned with the needs and expectations of the younger generation, because it has such a strong ethical basis to everything about the business. It's about social good as well as the bank doing well, right? But also this thing of delivering positive social impacts. That is key. And there are very few business out there that can show that. And particularly banks, traditional, typical banks, are very poor at showing that they make good social impacts. They can show that they might have made a good impact for business, yeah, but that's not great if you're part of society that has suffered at the hands of it. So I think broadly the point to make there is that cooperative banking is very well aligned with the SDGs. I know that you knew this, but I think this needs to be emphasized more, because when it comes about choices and where you need to go, not only just ethically wanting to be part of a cooperative bank, but knowing that that is, you know, intimately aligned with the global agenda for sustainability is a much bigger selling point, which I think needs to be pushed out there. And I think there was evidence from all the discussions we had that more work needs to be done on understanding the full range of ESG impacts. I think the social ones are very well understood, socioeconomic ones. That's why cooperative banks exist. But I think there's quite a few on the environmental side which are more nuanced. And I think they would be well to be understood, not just simple things like carbon footprint, which are really relevant, but those more difficult issues, deforestation, biodiversity loss, ocean pollution. The connection of banking to them is there, and that needs to be understood, even if it's at a cooperative level. So I think the final thing to say is, looking forward to the future, I think building the next generation of cooperative banking leaders is going to be key to the success of cooperativism. We've seen that we are going through all kinds of different changes about what is permitted and not. We're seeing an increasing global crisis around environment as well. We need those leaders who can manage that kind of crisis, who can understand where we're going and be, integrated into the way cooperative banking should be going. So I think everything about the next generation of leaders, that's really one of the things I was left with thinking about at the end. And I think I saw quite a few of them there in the audience. So what next? Just to finish off with what next, these are some of the things that I know what next, but I'm sure Valeria and Brigitte can add other things. The first thing to say is evaluation forms are being completed. They are going to inform strategy for 2024. There's already been quite a few that have come in so far. We'll see how they work out. The 2024 program activities will anyway include online training, webinars and workshops. So that's something we're going to look into, but I think there's quite a few themes from the Congress itself which could be followed up on. And there's the possibility of regional events as well. This thing about building future leaders of cooperativism, that will definitely be in some kind of event coming up. That was something which really came up as an idea of interest. But the other thing is just to say there has been strong support for the idea of holding annual events which take place between the 3-yearly Congress. I can see a lot of logic in this. They could be themed events each year, and they could be in certain regions as well. And there is a possibility perhaps for the CIBP to host one themselves in Brussels. I think that, so that's something really interesting to look into. Maybe we can see how that one develops. But I also think there's a real desire to build on the energy and the engagement of the Congress. We don't want to let this slip. It's been such a long time since the last one. A lot of positive energy came from this, but also a lot of discussion about useful, practical things to pursue. It wasn't all ideas in the air. So we need to make sure that those are pursued. And so I'll just finish with a quote from Matthias, actually. He said this on our call last week. Connecting with each other is not an end in itself. It is a means to an end. We must ensure that we follow up from the Congress and build on this momentum. Well, that might not be exactly what you said, Matthias, but that was the gist of it, okay? So I definitely echo what Matthias says there as well. You know, the fact we've made the connection, great. We need to do something about it. Just keep pushing it. So everyone on the call, if you haven't, reach out again to that person you said you would. And even if you are reached out to someone, is there anyone else that you did actually mean to follow up with? Follow up with them. Just keep it going, because if you put the energy out there, it comes back. And a network becomes solidified, just like a brain with neurons, the more messages go back and forth. So let's build the network that way. Okay, that sums up what I have to say. Time for questions and comments. I'll hand back to Valeria.
Thank you very, very much, Ted, for this great presentation. I hope that you all got a glimpse of what happened during the Congress in Paris early this month. And also for the ones who were there, I hope that you indeed remembered or were remembered of what you decided to do when you were going back home. So as Ted said, and Matthias, it's time for action. So within the CIBP Secretariat, with our governance, we are approaching also our members to discuss about the next steps in 2024. And hopefully the next step that Ted has introduced will happen and you will be hearing about it. So also if you want to contribute or if you have questions, please address them to Brigitte and I, or to your ambassador if you know him or her. Every member bank has an ambassador contact point with whom we work closely. So voilà, so I would be interesting also to hear from you, your impressions, your questions, your suggestions, or your remarks.
Somebody has their hand raised, Valeria?
Yes,
Yes,
Fabio
thank
has his
you.
hand raised.
Fabio.
Fabio.
Hi, thank you. So I have one question, Ted, for you. It's about your point of view about here in Brazil. Why do you think the main reason to grow each year this type of cooperative banking in Brazil compared to the other Latin America, for example? Because when I saw the last slides, when you try to compare the numbers, the majority cooperative bank, I think it's situable here in Brazil. Am I wrong or so?
That I wouldn't know, I'm afraid. I don't really know about the division of cooperative banking. You're talking about market share or size of the cooperative banking movement? Yeah.
About market share.
Indeed. I mean, probably maybe Valeria or Brigitte are the best to comment on that. They know the actual size. I would have thought it was the most important, but I don't know for certain.
Okay.
Yeah, I can compliment a little bit, is that indeed in Europe, within France, for instance, or if there's any French colleague attending today, you can compliment. But in France, the market share, the group BPCE is the second bank group in France. And with the cooperative banking system, they hold 40% of the market share. So not only the member bank of CIBP, but the cooperative banking system in France holds 40%, which is quite interesting and quite important. Another information I can give you, Fabio, is that, and then again, please, with the German colleagues that are connected today, please add a comment or complete the information I'm giving. But one, to give you an idea, is that in Germany, there are more or less 18 million members within the cooperative banking system, which is quite a huge importance. So France, Germany, Austria has been countries of inspiration for the cooperative movement. However, my point of view is that those cooperative member banks have been quite challenged by the regulator, by the European Central Bank, while in comparison, when asking regarding Brazil, and that is what we saw during the Congress and what we heard from Mr. Otávio Damaso, so representative of the Brazilian Central Bank, and also from Mr. Almada, is that the relationship between the cooperative
banking movement in Brazil, and the Brazilian regulator is quite good, and this relationship has contributed to a stable, more than 40 years relationship, and continue to build on that in order to recognize, and in any case, the role of the cooperative movement in Brazil for financial integration, financial education, etc., which is huge, and where then our European colleagues are a little bit amazed of this great relationship, and they realize how important it is to keep building on this relationship, in this case with the European Central Bank. Please, again, to our colleagues in France, Austria, Germany, please complement what I'm saying. And I hope, Fabio, that this has given you a small overview.
Oh, yeah. Thank you. I appreciate. Thank you for the answer.
Any other question or remark or souvenir maybe also that you might want to share? Yes.
Can I? I just want to ask you, because I see some of the people here on the screen and also in the names list that were present in the Congress. Some of you were members of the working groups or were just attendees or belong to our organization team. My question is to you, what were your personal highlights of the Congress, or special moments, and why? Would like to hear from you and from your perspective. Juliana?
Hello, good morning, good afternoon to some of you. So I was part of the organization. I helped the team. It was a great pleasure to work with such a great team, and Ted with his energy, and he's exactly like this in person, if not even more excited at all moments. I thought it was interesting that Ted brought to us that one of his takeaways was about the values, and I share the same thing. I think it was very interesting how we saw people from all over the world. I mean, we counted that the participants in the Congress, we had people from 17 different countries. And when you talk to people in the audience, or when you were watching the Congress itself, we talked about the values. So every time we came back to how the values are important, and also how we have to keep in mind to show the youth, the young people that are coming, to keep this in mind so we don't lose our key values in the cooperative movement. So it was very interesting. I thought it was really great to see, because although we have many different characteristics, some of the thoughts and the values are the same. So it's very nice to see when you get together that although different countries, different ideas, we all want the same thing in the future. And it was just great for the networking. It was amazing to meet so many different people, and hope we have this again soon. Should I call on the next person? Because I see some faces.
Please go ahead, Juliana.
No, I'm not going to do that to my fellow colleagues.
Well, what about the other Juliana? Juliana Suarez. Come on, tell us what you thought.
Well, I'm Juliana also. I'm Juliana too, apparently. And I don't know, I haven't been working in the cooperative system for so long, unlike most of you here. I joined CIBP and CIBP in January, and it was great to see how committed to the values people are, and how thinking forward this entire movement is, like you said. And to see that despite having some different challenges, everyone can complement each other. So, like, for example, the challenges that are happening in Brazil are complementary to those happening in Europe and in North America, for example. And particularly, that's the biggest outcome I've had. And to see how people are actually engaged in the movement.
Yeah, that's great. I really got that sense of engagement. It was amazing. Also, I mean, for me, it was the real kind of surprise because I knew I'd get on with the Brazilians, and I'm glad to say the Brazilians were just as great as they always are. I got on with the Brazilians because Brazilians are easy to get on with, you know? So that was fine. But what I didn't expect is actually I would get on so well with the whole Germanic crowd as well. So I became very friendly with the Germans and the Austrians, and it was just really nice. It was, it hadn't sort of been in my mind. And the French, I got on very well with. But as you know, sometimes the French and the English, we have our history, you know? So it was very polite, shall I say.
Well, since I was called out, I would like to know what Cristal is thinking about the Congress as well.
Hello, everybody. No, I just found it amazing to be a little part of the organization. I was really happy that we were able to gather so many people from many different horizons. I think of course the speakers and so on, it was really interesting, but the meeting of people, the networking, the sharing values and so on was really the nicest part for me. And I really want to thank all the core team and Ted to make it real because it was a long run, and it was a real pleasure and satisfaction to see the result. So no, I think it's something we should do again, and I think it's good for the let's say for the CIBP to be alive and to live. The members have to meet really and to share the values to reinforce it.
So then we will also contribute a bit. It was a really inspiring personalities, and we also try to grab some of this fire and try to get it within our organization. And we see also that the cooperativism is getting more and more modern again, and we are actually, yeah, I didn't know that there are so many people who are also it's different if you see them with your own eyes and hear all this stuff. It was a great experience and also very useful for our work, since we are with regulatory burden, some stuff confronted each and every day. So it's the creation of shareholder value is always a good starting point for us to get our argumentation right for the regulatory burden stuff. So yeah, thanks. That's what we can contribute.
That's great to hear. I must say, I really like that idea, as you said. I mean, it's only when you see people, you actually hear the stories as well from all around the world. Yeah, it makes you realize you're part of something bigger. So that in itself is a support. I think that's great. Brigitte, what about some of your memories? Well, I say memories. It sounds like it was years ago. It was 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago. But yeah, some of your thoughts on the Congress as well.
Well, for me, it's always difficult to say because I'm organizing from the organization team. As you noted, we were even involved a bit longer than you were. So it's hard to judge it because you see also the problems. But all in all, I think it was a great Congress. And what I really liked is that a lot of people came back to me and said that they could really feel the cooperative spirit, and that they came back to work energized, they had inspiration. It's a different thing than sitting, listening to a webinar, for example, or just feeling it, being there with all these different nationalities, talking and mingling with some other cooperative institutions from Brazil or from France. And yeah, you had to mingle, right? So I think this was for me personally the highlight. So what about you, Valeria?
I have a big smile when I listen to all of you, and I really hope that in the content of your profession, of your job, of working in a cooperative bank, it really resonates and inspires you, and again answers to some of the questions that you may have about the purpose of working in a cooperative bank. So that's for one, and I think that it's important, it should be important that also our CIBP members, executive committee, listen to these exchanges. It's to them that we also have the duty, I would say, to bring this these messages, as they are the representatives also nationally in your countries, and how inspiring it is for you as colleagues, employees, decision makers also within your organization. And I would say the responsibility you would have on that, not per se on bringing these messages to your executive committee member, but also within the meaning of, again, as I said, of working in a cooperative bank and on the actions you have locally. So this is what is the purpose actually of such a congress, is for you to not only get inspired, to connect, to get new fresh ideas of what is happening elsewhere and what is a success factor, and also then be willing to cooperate together. And this of course takes time, but this is again a dedication. What are the actions that together the CIBP members can create, right? So tangible actions, I would say, tangible needs of support, of collaboration, and of understanding what can be done together and creating it. So this would be my keyword also that I will be bringing to the executive committee members. And also that it's meaningful for them, right? It's meaningful for all of us here, and it should be also meaningful for the banks as cooperative banks institutions.
Great. Any other questions or comments people wanted to bring up about the Congress? Anyone want to pitch for doing the next Congress? Where's it going to be? Could it be somewhere very exotic? I was thinking Jamaica. Could we get Jamaica on board, and then Congress would be great.
This is a good one. Yes, as you might know, we within CIBP, the purpose is also to keep this network alive, and also connect with other cooperative banks around the world, and to elaborate some concrete projects with other cooperative banks. So inviting the credit union in Jamaica was one of the approaches that we have. And as you said, Ted, Austin Brown had a clear mission on what it means to provide credit services to the Jamaicans workers. So, and the duty of having a sound governance, cooperative governance. So this is one thing that, as you said in the beginning, regulation and governance within the cooperative system is of importance. And then from there, develop the possibility for other organizations, other countries to create their own cooperative bank as an alternative in their countries. Yes. So yeah, if you want to pitch, if you have suggestions, if you want to contribute also within the organizational team and within the topics that of the next Congress can bring, please, when you are inspired, when you have an idea, just send us an SMS, an email with the keyword next topic for the Congress. This could be helpful. And then we start building the Congress for every 3 years. And the idea, hopefully, we get approval for that to organize every year a topic, a Congress topic, or, you know, something about a topic that you think it's important, and that we reunite all your colleagues from different member banks to discuss about that. That would be the idea. So we are in a trustful group, so drop a mail and we take this into account. It's thanks to you. That is the last word that I would say. Actually, it's thanks to all of you that we had this Congress, right? Without you, without your colleagues who contributed to build this Congress, it would not have happened. So a big thank you to all of you.
Yeah, and this Congress is made by you for you. It sounds weird or strange, but it's really true. Because of your work and because of your expertise, we were able to put together a pretty nice, ambitious agenda, right, Ted?
Absolutely, yeah. No, I think, and that's what's so that's what's so positive about it. I just think the way that continued the whole way through. Yeah. Okay, well, that completes everything I want to do. I can hand it back to you if there are any other questions or other things people want to discuss.
No, I think that, again, we all have each other's contact details. Most of it was said. Hopefully you can attend. So start applying now and start checking with your organization if you can attend to a CIBP reunion somewhere in the world in the coming years.